Welcome to DTKane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. I'm DTKane, author of the epic fantasy series The Aggresfar Saga and the Spoken Books Uprising. Each week, I read from one of my novels, discuss my writing process, answer your questions, and have general discussions about fantasy fiction. It's like a book club, except I do all the work for you. Find show notes, info about all my novels, and much more at dtkane.com. Here's the show. Hello there, friends. Welcome back, or welcome if you're a new listener, to DTKane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. Today is July 10th, 2023, as I record this, which is episode 40 of Season 2 of the podcast, and episode number 67 overall. And we are doing something a little different today. As I've been saying, we are going to be discussing another author's book, The Riddle-Master of Hed by Patricia A. McKillip. If you are new to the show, maybe you're joining because you heard I was doing this read-along. Welcome. My name is dtkane. I am a fantasy author. I write the series called The Spoken Books Uprising. The first 5 books of the series are out right now, and I am plowing my way through the draft of the 6th one currently. That takes place in a world where you can only cast magic by reading spells out of rare magical books that are called spoken books in my world. And the catch is only the wealthy elite in that world can read. They don't let anyone else become literate, so they are able to hog all the magical power. Well, sort of. They hog it, but most of the elite cannot actually, they're not capable of drawing magic from the books, so they enslave all the people who actually can cast the magic and force them to read spells for them, but they never teach them how to read, so it's kind of a complex societal structure there. So anyway, we're not here to talk about the Spoken Books Uprising, but that's just a little bit about me. So why don't we jump right into our discussion of Riddle-Master. So this is a trilogy. We're only talking about the first book in the trilogy here today. I'm going to try to keep this discussion to about a half an hour. Once I get going, sometimes I have a little trouble stopping, but I think we'll be able to keep it here. This is a new format for me, so bear with me. I think I'm just going to kind of walk through a synopsis of the book and kind of share some observations I have along the way. And then I'm going to talk about some of the themes in the book, my favorite non-main character. Then I've picked out some prose and quotes that I found either particularly well written or interesting for one reason or another. And I'll share a few predictions about what I think is going to happen in the rest of the trilogy. I've purposely not read books 2 and 3 of the trilogy yet, so I can't accidentally spoil anything. Though I suppose that's a good point. There are going to be tons of spoilers ahead, so if you have not read Riddle-Master of Hed by Patricia A. McKillip, you should probably turn the podcast off now because I'm about to spoil it all for you. So here we go. At the beginning of the book, we open with an interesting first line here. Kind of draws you in. Morgan of Hed met the High One's harpist one autumn day, when the trade ships docked at toll for the season's exchange of goods. Kind of laying out there right away. The High One is capitalized, so that's obviously some very important person in this world, but he has a harpist. That's interesting that, the High One's representative, or the High One's, I don't know, captain of the guard or something. No, he's harpist. We'll talk a little bit about him shortly. Though even that opening line there made me realize I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of the names in this book, so I'm just going to apologize once here. ahead of time. It's got some strange names, to say the least. So there you have it. But okay, so Chapter 1, this is all about kind of establishing what I like to refer to as the main character's Shire, which is a reference to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, of course. But, you have to establish, the character's status quo right before they're launched into their adventure. So Morgan is our main character, and he apparently is the prince of this island nation that's called Hed, Hed. And even though he's a prince, that seems to be the head person of the island. We learned that his parents just recently died, and he was the land rule passed to him, which we don't immediately learn, but that's actually kind of like this magical thing where he has a sense for all the plants and the trees and everything in the land, and that passes automatically from the current ruler to the heir when the current ruler passes away. So Morgan has that power. He has two younger siblings, Eliard and Tristan. Eliard's a younger brother, and Tristan is a younger sister. Like I said, they've all seemed to have grown up a little too fast here since their parents died the previous year. And it seems Morgan is still kind of settling into his role as leader, right? It seems both his younger siblings are, they're not exactly just listening to him, right? He's the guy in charge. His sister seems to have taken on kind of a motherly role, kind of scolding them for, not keeping clean, not keeping the house clean, and things like that. And Eliard, I think at one point they get into like a fist fight, and he punches Morgan and knocks him down in front of a bunch of the farmhands that Morgan is supposed to be the leader of. So, still getting used to his new role here, obviously. We get a description of Morgan up front here. He has hair and eyes the color of light beer. He is slender and proud, and he has a trick of looking at people remotely, like a fox glancing up from a pile of chicken feathers. That's in contrast to his kind of burly brother and demure sister here. Quickly, so we get about a page of them, going on about, the ships that have docked in the harbor, and what they're going to be trading with them this year. But then his sister reveals that Morgan has been hiding this crown under his bed for the past 6 months. Apparently, he won this crown in a riddle game from a ghost. And his brother and sister are upset about this because apparently the ghost would have killed him if he had lost the riddle game. They're upset that he took such a risk when they need him here, farming on the island of Hed, and kind of leading the island after their parents died. Though we do see that Morgan is dedicated to his brother and sister, right? At one point his brother says, "How will I know now that when you leave Hed you'll come back?" Morgan says, "I swear this, I will always come back," which perhaps is foreseeing that he'll be going away, or foreshadowing that he'll be going away again very soon. Initially we're kind of like a riddle game. What is that? But we quickly learn that Morgan's father let him go away to the College of Riddle-Masters in Caithnard, which apparently is out of the ordinary for someone from Hed, much less its heir. Seems that people there kind of keep to themselves and don't go on adventures, which sounds kind of familiar, right? We were just talking about the Shire, so just like the hobbits of the Shire tend to keep to themselves, and they look down on Bilbo and Frodo for being adventurers, right? Kind of the same thing here at Hed. I think one of Morgan's farmhands early on says, you shouldn't let your interest in riddles interfere with your job here. So obviously, it's kind of Morgan seems to be kind of an oddball here, even though he is the leader of the island. So after we kind of set that scene of Morgan settling into his leadership role and, the family dynamic between him and his younger siblings. He's out alone playing his harp, and he meets the High One's harpist, whose name is Death, Deeth, not Death. Though I've been trying to figure out if his name is supposed to be some sort of reference to dying. I don't know that I've really figured that out quite yet, though certainly Death is about to lead Morgan on lots of dangerous adventures here. The High One seems to be some sort of god or mythic figure or ruler of the known world here. I think as the further along we get, he's kind of considered all three by different people throughout the land. He, at least allegedly, sent Death, his harpist, to express his sorrow to Morgan and his family over the death of his parents. Then as Morgan and Death are talking, it comes out that Morgan has this crown, and it seems that the king of An, or An, A-N, his name is Matham, has promised his daughter's hand to whoever wins the crown from that ghost, who apparently was one of his ancestors. The king's daughter's name is Raederle, Raederle. Morgan knows her because he was good friends with her brother at college. So here's our inciting incident. It seems it's a little rush here. All of a sudden Morgan's like, oh yes, I would be interested in marrying her. So he agrees to sail away with the High One's harpist to go see about claiming Raederle's hand in marriage. So that moves us on to the next chapter. On the way to An, or An, to claim Raederle's hand, they stop in Cathenard, which again, that's where the college is, and the master riddlers reside. We learn on the way that Death is 1,000 years old. He was born after the founding of Lungold, which is the city of wizards, which we learn has since been destroyed, and all the wizards have mysteriously disappeared from the land. Morgan checks in with Rude, who was his college roommate and who is the brother of Raederle. That's how he knows her, and apparently he formed a crush for her while he was on college there, because he'd met her there at Cathenard several times. I think when Rude learns that Morgan is the one who claimed the crown from the ghost, he gives a great shout, which is some sort of magical ability that breaks things. Rude says it's a thing of impulse. You're not supposed to use the great shout, but he's so surprised that his friend Morgan is the one who beat this ghost at the riddle contest. And it seems that Morgan had no idea that there was a prize for claiming or for winning the riddle contest. When Rude asks him why he challenged the ghost, he just says, "Because I had to do it, for no other reason than that, and I didn't tell anyone simply because it was such a private thing." The book never comes right out and says it, but he apparently challenged the ghost shortly after his parents died, and you get some sense that he's guilty about that. He kind of feels like it's his fault because his parents had gone from Hed to Cathenard because he was going to college there, and his mother was interested in seeing the big city, I guess, because, like I said, people don't or rarely adventure out of Hed there. But on their return journey, their boat was caught in a storm and sank. So there's obviously some guilt here. Maybe Morgan kind of rashly just kind of threw himself into this contest with the ghost, after the guilt was catching up to him about his parents dying. So after he talks to Rude, then he goes to the 8 masters of the college and tells them about his riddle game. He used a riddle about someone called Kern of Hed to stump the ghost. I guess the idea was you told each other riddles until one said a riddle that the other didn't know the answer to. And I'll be honest, I didn't really totally understand the riddle about Kern of Hed. And I don't think we need to get into it now, but the takeaway from that was no one seems to really pay attention to Hed. It's kind of this island off the east coast of the continent, and even this ghost who was, allegedly knew all the riddles there were, did not know about this riddle that came out of Hed. Master Ohm, though he is the head of the masters at the college, notes, though, that there is a riddle without an answer out there, and Morgan might not be here if the ghost had asked him that. In fact, Morgan recalls that he and Master Ohm had spent a whole winter searching for the answer to this riddle, but found no mention of the 3 stars in any of the writings of the wizards. Again, the wizards, they seem to have known just about everything there was to know, but they have now mysteriously disappeared from the land about 700 years prior. We don't learn it right here, but we soon learn. It was a little confusing for a few pages, but then we learn, well, the 3 stars are important because Morgan has 3 stars marked on his face, so that's why they were trying to figure out this riddle. No one knows why he's got these 3 stars on his face. Rood, Morgan's roommate, that's R-O-O-D, by the way. He says Morgan should go ask the High One for the answer to the riddle, who apparently lives in a mountain all the way north. Kane is kind of in the south of the continent. Morgan does not want to do that, though. He just wants to settle down and be a farmer. He wants to marry and then, quote, go home and plant grain and make beer and read books. Is that so hard to understand? No, Morgan, it's not. That sounds like a pretty good life to me. But this is a classic example of our hero resisting the call to action that often happens, particularly in fantasy books that are based on, the hero's journey, which is kind of the typical plot structure for lots of these fantasy novels. There's the famous book by what's the author's name? Joseph Campbell, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. It's kind of a book that analyzes that whole hero's journey in detail. Maybe just a couple quick examples. In The Hobbit, Bilbo does not want to go with the dwarves on their journey to defeat Smaug initially. Luke Skywalker in Star Wars does, he thinks Obi-Wan is crazy when he wants him to come be a Jedi initially. So this is kind of a typical plot structure here so far. But then when Morgan says he doesn't want to do that, Rood says he'll never accept being a master if it's given to Morgan before he finds the answer to the riddle of the 3 stars, which that's pretty bold, right? Or blunt or rude. I don't know if the author is, if Miss McKillip intentionally named him R-O-O-D to kind of play off the fact that he's being kind of rude to his friend here. Basically saying, he's obviously at the college to become a master and earn the black robe of a master. But he said, if you give it to Morgan, I won't take it. I'll be insulted, basically. So why is he so insistent that Morgan find the answer to this riddle? Rood then kind of storms out here, and Master Ohm subtly encourages Morgan to find the answer. He says, I suspect a journey to the High One will not be as useless as you think. And, of course, I'm assuming you've read the book here already. Again, spoilers here, so, shut your ears or turn the podcast off if you don't want any spoilers here. But, obviously, we later learn that Ohm is likely Grishel Ohm or something. He's got a very weird, long name. But basically the founder of Lungold, and which is the city of the wizards. He's kind of hiding in plain sight. He also seems to be the High One. You don't learn that at all really until like the very end of this book 1. But it's interesting here that he's encouraging Morgan to go see the High One. And then we kind of get what I think in traditional plot structure is the theme stated, usually about, 10 to 15% of the way through the book. Some character will basically tell our hero the theme of the story, and of course the hero will ignore him. So Master Ohm relates this story about a harpist called Ilon, I-L-O-N, who offended King Har with a song and fled to the mountains. But he never stopped harping, and his harping was so beautiful that word of him spread all the way back to the king. Of course, this King Har is able to shapeshift into a wolf, and he sought the harpist out. We will actually see King Har again later on in the story. And of course, the lesson of that tale we learn is that the man running from death must first run from himself, which of course is impossible. But Morgan responds to that by saying, I don't see what that has to do with me. I'm not running. I'm simply not interested. But I think that probably the main theme here of the story is, finding or accepting one's self for so much of the story. Morgan is running away from what is obviously the path that is meant for him. So kind of accepting your place in the world or what you're meant to do is certainly a major theme here of the story that's referenced here. And Morgan, or then Ohm tells Morgan with a subtle smile, "Then I wish you the peace of your disinterest, Morgan of Hed." Obviously Ohm knows that Morgan's not going to be able to stay disinterested for very long here, no matter what he wants. So then Morgan leaves on a ship that evening, but he wakes up at night, and mysteriously all of the crew has disappeared except for Death, the harpist who was with him on the ship. And then the ship sinks when it hits a storm. So we go into the next chapter here. Morgan wakes up on a beach with amnesia, and he can't speak. He's rescued by this recluse named Astrin Yarmis, or Yimris, Y-M-R-I-S. There's not enough vowels in that name. Also, Astrin has this wildcat named Zell. Turns out he is the exiled land heir of the land of Yimris. Astrin's a sort of archaeologist. He's living in a kind of like a hut near this archaeological ruin of a city of the long-gone Earthmasters, kind of another mythic race here that's disappeared from the land. Something terrible happened long ago that destroyed them and their cities. Astrin is trying to figure out what that was. And Morgan, since Astrin has no idea who Morgan is, Astrin kind of takes him in, and Morgan starts helping him with his archaeological endeavors. But then Astrin is attacked by some creature that came out of the sea. And then here's an example of some prose that I liked from the book here. It was shaped out of seaweed and foam and wet pearl, and the sword was of darkness and silver water. So it sounds like Astrin killed this creature but was injured, and Morgan helps nurse him back to health. Once Astrin gets healthy again, they decide to travel to Kane, which again is where Morgan had just come from, where the college is, to try to figure out who Morgan is. But on the way, they get waylaid by a couple of traitors who try to kill them. Astrin kills them instead, but Morgan is injured. And then word that the king's heir just killed 2 traitors gets back to the king, and he kind of sends like a little army to, bring his brother back to the castle, or arrest him if he doesn't come willingly. Death, the harpist, is there with them, and he's relieved to find Morgan unharmed, though Morgan still doesn't remember who he is. On the way back to Yimris, we learn that there has been news of a strange rebellion brewing among the coastal lords, which, I guess again is interesting because there's strange creatures coming out of the sea. Then we arrive at Yimris. So, apologies, I just knocked something off my desk there. But we arrive at Yimris, and in the king's hall there is this beautiful harp with 3 red stars set into it, obviously matching the stars that are on Morgan's face. And the sight of it seems to shake Morgan out of his amnesia and his silence. And that brings us right into chapter 4. We learn that the harp was found by a fisherman the year prior and made no sound until Morgan touched it. There was some sort of muting spell on it, but Morgan is able to play it. In subsequent conversation here, we learn that one of the merchants who attacked Astrid and Morgan had died 2 years ago. So there are either dead men walking around or things that are able to take on the appearance of dead men. We meet King Hiru, who is Astrid's brother. Ariel is King Hiru's wife. And we learn that Astrid apparently left because he saw Ariel die before the wedding. But then a woman looking like Ariel showed up at the wedding. So Astrid seems to believe that she's some sort of shapeshifter impersonating Ariel, but the king doesn't believe him. So that's why he left. Which again, that would also... This is an example of... sometimes I think... the foreshadowing in this was really good. In fact, when I went back and reread the book getting ready for this episode, I was impressed with all the foreshadowing that was subtly put into the first half of the book. Like, we just mentioned King Har and his shape-shifting. There's this, kind of this offhand story that Ohm tells Morgan about the shape-shifting King Har, and then Har and his shape-shifting become very important about 3/4 of the way through the book. So that was impressive. But, here we kind of learn, like, on page 2 of chapter 4 about, that merchant is a shapeshifter, right? And then, the king's wife is a shapeshifter. And then, Morgan gets attacked by a shapeshifter, 3 pages later. So sometimes the foreshadowing is a little rushed or just a little obvious. It's like, this new concept was just introduced. And then after you see it happen a couple of times, it's like, this is kind of just like a dead giveaway about what's going to happen in the second half of this chapter. But I guess that's one of the trade-offs of having a shorter epic fantasy, right? If you're listening to this, you're probably a big fan of the doorstopper books like Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, which are great. But sometimes you want a shorter story, and you don't have 500 pages to to set things up. So. More of an observation than a criticism. But let's see. Like I said, Astrid falls asleep that night. Morgan goes out in the hall to play that harp again that apparently only he can play. Then Ariel shows up. And I don't know if this is smart or not on Morgan's part, but, he sees her and is like, Astrid told me that you're dead. And she responds to him, no, you are. So becomes pretty obvious here that she's out to get him. She is older than the earliest riddle that was ever asked. So she is some ancient creature, it seems like. And I like this. The wise man can give a name to his enemy. Which, a subtle insult here to Morgan, who's supposed to be good at riddles, right? But he has no idea who she is. So, kind of saying he's a fool because he doesn't know who she is. There was a little girl with Ariel when she enters, but she shapeshifts into a large man with a sword. So there's more than one shapeshifter. But Morgan uses his harp to shatter the man's sword. So not only is he the only person able to draw songs out of it, but it's a magic harp. We quickly learn after this incident that the harp belonged to Yrth, Yrth, who is one of the wizards from Lungold, Death the Harpists. He was actually there when Yrth made it. The noise of the shattering sword, and there's a bunch of like shields and decorative stuff, I guess, in the hall that also shatter when Morgan uses the harp. The noise brings others out into the hall. Ariel reverts back to kind of her shy king's wife, and nothing happens at that point, though Morgan has kind of figured out that maybe Astrid is right about the whole shape-shifting thing. We have a quick little scene after that where we learn that the king had met Morgan's parents in Canethard right before they boarded the ship that killed them, and Morgan's father had bought the harp for Morgan. That's how the king was familiar with the harp when the fisherman brought it to him. He remembered seeing it with Morgan's father previously. And Morgan slowly starts to put together that maybe someone sank the ship on purpose so that the harp with the stars didn't get to the boy with the stars on his face. At this point, he really just wants to go home and not get involved. in this game. He knows he's going to get pulled into this riddle game about the stars, and he's not going to be able to get out of it. But at this point, he really still just wants to go home and be the farmer on Hed. The next night, the shapeshifter comes to Morgan at night impersonating Astrid and tries to smother him with a pillow, but the king intervenes. The shapeshifter turns into a bird and plucks out one of the real Astrid's eyes and escapes, but finally it's revealed that the king's wife all this time has been a shapeshifter kind of infiltrating his court. And then this brings us to plot point 1, which is where our hero finally decides, okay, I've got to go on this adventure. Morgan says, I can't deny that these stars on my face may be deadly to those that I love. So he's going to go to Riddle-Master Mountain and ask the High One what exactly is going on here. So that brings us to, I guess, what's the start of Act 2 of the story. Death and Morgan begin to travel north. Let's see. Death kind of gives us a little more details about the harp. Yurth's harp that was made 1,000 years ago that Morgan now has. It seems that Yurth knew there was going to be someone with the 3 stars and made it specifically for Morgan, even though that was 1,000 years ago. So how did he know that? And more importantly, why are these stars never mentioned in Yurth's writings or the writings of other wizards? Apparently, Yurth knew something about them, but remember, Master Ohm and Morgan spent a whole winter at the College of Riddle-Masters trying to figure out what these stars are all about, and they found nothing. They meet this woman, Lyra, on the road, who is the head of a small army of female warriors. In fact, to this point, I was thinking the cast was a little male heavy here, but now we get Lyra and her army of female warriors or guards. She's been tasked with bringing Morgan and Death to the Morgul, who is a leader, the leader of the land that they're in now. Let me see. Hurun, Herun, the Morgul of Hurun. Morgan doesn't want to delay his trip to the High One, but then Lyra tells him that the Morgul has a riddle for Morgan that holds your name. And the riddle is, who is the Starbearer, and what will he loose that is bound? Morgan kind of freaks out when he hears this, and he tries to run away, but Death goes after him and points out that there are those like Ariel, the shapeshifter, who won't stop until he's dead. And obviously if Morgan goes home, he's going to bring those murderous intentions with him, so he kind of finally... he realized back in the previous chapter that he needs to go ask the High One questions, but now he's kind of realizing, I can't go back home because it's going to be dangerous for the other people there. Death obviously kind of knows more about the stars than he is letting on here. There's this passage on page 85. There's a lot of mysterious stuff about Death again. Why is the High One's harpist such an important figure? I mean, usually musicians aren't that important in the grand scheme of things. That may have come out as an insult to musicians. That was unintentional, but especially in fantasy stories, usually it's not the harp player who is a powerful being. Usually it's the wizard or the sword master or whatever. Let's see. What is this passage here? Let's see. I'm not finding the exact passage here on page 85. But the bottom line is Death kind of implies that he knows more about the stars than he's able to tell based on his current instructions from the High One. But I swear this, Death said, if you finish this harsh journey to Riddle-Master Mountain, I will give you anything you ask of me. I will give you my life because you bear 3 stars. So obviously Death must know something about the importance of these 3 stars because he is willing to sacrifice his life for them. So we continue on to Hurun in the Morgul, who has this riddle about the 3 stars. These people kind of seem like this world's analog of the elves to me. I mean, I guess this is kind of a loose comparison, but I think I read someone who compared this story favorably to Tolkien. Oh yeah, A Reader's Guide to Fantasy. It is a rare thing that Patricia McKillip has done to write a fantasy trilogy good enough to be compared to Tolkien. And I got to be honest, when I read the first chapter, I was like, this has a long way to go before it's compared to Tolkien. But I became increasingly impressed as I went along here. We get the description here of the Morgul at page 87 of the book here. She was a tall woman with blue-black hair drawn back from her face, falling without a ripple against her loose robe of leaf-green cloth. Her house was a vast oval of black stone. Water from the river flowing beneath it fanned out over stone fountains in her yard, formed tiny streams and pools where fish slipped like red and green and gold flames beneath the tracery of shadows from the trees. I don't know. It invoked some images of some elf-like images for me anyway. We also learned that she has what's called the gift of sight, which allows her to see through things and also see things that are occurring very far away. She says that she found this riddle about the stars in a book that had been locked by a wizard, the wizard If of the unpronounceable name. That kind of sounds like something from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, if I'm being honest. Though his name had to be sung as well as pronounced in order to open the book. I thought that was kind of cool, kind of incorporating music into the pronunciation of a thing. I thought that was neat. The Morgul says she asked Master Ohm about the riddle once, but he said he knew nothing of it. And then she kind of drops this bomb out of nowhere that Ohm's name reminds her of, again, Gistes Cholom. Gistessel. There was too many vowels in some places and not enough vowels in others, and too many letters in general for this name. I just started calling him G in my notes. But it's G and then a bunch of letters, and then Ohm are the last three letters. So she's like, oh, well, Master Ohm reminds me of this guy's much longer name that ends with Ohm, who was the founder of the Lungold Wizards who disappeared 700 years ago. And she also thinks that G. Ohm is the same person who he both founded and destroyed Lungold. She speculates that he brought the wizards together in order to control them and purposefully keep them ignorant of the riddle of the stars. Though this all seems like a lot of speculation at this point. I think most of this turns out to be true, so I think this is maybe an example of a bit of heavy-handed foreshadowing here. The only proof she has at this point is that her sight could not pass through Ohm, even though it can pass through anything else. So she found that suspicious. But if her speculations are true, then why would Ohm, or G Ohm as it were, why would he found Lungold and then destroy it? As we get a little further, it seems likely he probably destroyed Lungold in order to keep the riddles about the three stars a secret. For what it's worth, the Morgul believes that the shapeshifters are a different problem from Ohm. The evidence for that is, well, he could have just killed Morgan while he was at the college if Ohm was running the shapeshifters who are trying to kill Morgan now. So we seem to have kind of our two sides here, Ohm and whoever he leads, whether it's the wizards or someone else, and then the shapeshifters. And then, relatedly, are the shapeshifters in league with that creature from the sea that we saw earlier and are maybe leading a rebellion of the coastal lords? There's a lot of pieces on the board here at this point. When Lyra hears about all these people who are, maybe trying to attack Morgan, Lyra's like, well, I should teach you how to defend yourself, Morgan. But Morgan refuses. In fact, when they gave him a new set of clothes after he arrived in Heron, they gave him a belt knife, but he did not put it on. And Morgan explains that Hed is peaceful. The peace of Hed is passed like the land rule from ruler to ruler. It is bound into the earth of Hed, and it is the High One's business, not mine, to break that peace. So Morgan's a bit of a pacifist here. Or at least the people of Hed are pacifists in general, and Morgan is trying to cling to that prior identity of being from Hed. So he is not going to learn how to defend himself. The Morgul of Huron also notes that she saw Yurth's harp with a traitor last year before it ended up with Morgan's father. So she's going to try to get more information about who that traitor was for Morgan, though that kind of went down a black hole, and we never hear anything else about that, at least in book 1 of the trilogy here. That night, Morgan goes to bed with Lyra guarding his door. He's attacked that night by a shapeshifter. It seems to be a different shapeshifter than the Ariel, the one that attacked him prior. This is a shapeshifter with a harp of bones and polished shells. Its song makes Morgan sluggish, and the song the shapeshifter sings is a song about the crops of Hed failing, drying up, and withering. Morgan finally kind of, is able to get himself out of the trance and gets into a wrestling match with the shapeshifter. Shapeshifter is changing into various shapes, various animals, and inanimate objects to try to escape Morgan's grasp. Finally, he changes into a sword with 3 stars, and Morgan kind of flinches back from it. But that finally, causes Lyra to turn around and see the attack. Apparently, the shapeshifter was using an illusion of silence, so she was kind of like still standing right at the door while Morgan is getting beat up. When she sees the attack, she throws her spear at the shapeshifter but misses. But then Morgan picks up the spear and uses it to kill the shapeshifter. So kind of again, as soon as we learn that Morgan is a pacifist, I gotta, well, that probably means he's gonna have to kill someone here pretty soon. So that happens at the end of the chapter. With the shapeshifter dead, though, Morgan just wants to go home because he realizes that no man could accept the name of the stars on that sword, and still keep the land rule of Hed. This is kind of the midpoint of the story. Usually at the midpoint, there's either some sort of false victory or false defeat for the main character. In this instance, I believe this would be considered a false defeat. Morgan had decided that he needed to travel to Erlendstar Mountain to protect the ones that he loved. But he gets to the midpoint and, he realizes, that's not going to be enough, right? If he actually goes on this quest, he's going to he may lose the ones that he loves, right? So he was not going to Erlendstar Mountain for the right reasons. So that's why he, again, decides he just wants to run away to go home. In fact, that's kind of what he says here. It's not death I'm afraid of. It's losing everything I love for a name and a sword and a destiny I did not choose and will not accept. I would rather die than lose the land rule. So Morgan leaves Huron, Heron, Heuren, for the coast. He wants to find a ship home to Hed. On the way, this is just a quick aside, but I think it's interesting. The land rule is kind of the High One's only real law, and the way that works is, anyone who tries to start a war, who tries to steal land, loses their power of the land rule, and the rulers love that power so dearly that they dare not, risk doing anything to lose it. So that kind of keeps everyone in check. There's never any, big wars or big attempted land grabs because the High One can just pluck that power away from the land rulers. Morgan says even wizards would never have dreamed of trying to kill a land ruler. So that kind of drives home the point of, how dangerous this threat that's chasing Morgan is. It's kind of flaunting the High One's one law, right? And seem to be getting away with it. So on the way to the coast, Morgan stops at a tavern. He gets into this conversation with a trader about the Wolf of Osterland, who is King Har, who we heard about in that story from Master Ohm back in chapter 2. You wonder if Ohm was trying to subtly, remind Morgan about Har, because it's what Har is about to teach Morgan here is very important. But it turns out Har also has a riddle about the 3 stars. What will 1 star call out of silence, 1 star out of darkness, and 1 star out of death? Morgan, after hearing this, Morgan kind of has this epiphany at night, right? He realizes what had upset Rude so much earlier. If Morgan was going to offer the piece of head to Rude's sister Raydurl, that would have been a lie, right? He couldn't go to her claiming honor for winning a riddle game when he was ignoring even more important riddles. And reaching out to her would have been like reaching out to the strangeness and uncertainty of his other name while simultaneously, ignoring it, right? On the one hand, he would be saying, well, I can marry you because I'm this great riddle master, right? But on the other hand, he's like, well, but I'm ignoring this riddle over here, even though it's maybe the most important riddle in the whole world. So he kind of sees the hypocrisy here of, kind of ignoring who he really is. He can either return to Hed quietly without Raydurl and kind of wait for the storm to come, or he can set his mind to a riddle game that he has no hope of winning. But, it seems maybe he is starting to accept who he truly is. He wants Raydurl. He wants to marry her, and the only way to do that is to actually pursue this riddle of the 3 stars. So he chooses to head to the land of Yair, Y-R-Y-E, to ask the king of Osterland a riddle. So that's plot point 2, another major choice from the hero. He kind of shifts from things happening to him to actively doing things, which leads us to Act 3. Osterland is in the north, it's cold, and it's ruled by King Har, who can shapeshift, and he was tutored by the wizard Suth, S-U-T-H. Morgan gets trapped in a blizzard, but he is rescued by a Vesta, which is kind of like this sort of magical, majestic elk. It's got white fur with gold horns and hooves and purple eyes. Turns out the Vesta that rescues him, of course, is none other than King Har in his shapeshifter form, and he takes Morgan to his house. In repayment for being saved, Morgan agrees to do whatever Har asks, and of course, Har has a very difficult task for Morgan. He wants him to find Suth the wizard, who Har insists is not dead, because a few years ago he found Suth's son, who is a shapeshifter, also able to shapeshift into a Vesta. Found Suth's son living, and he was able to look into the son's mind, and he saw Suth still alive. It also turns out that Suth gave Har 5 riddles about the Star Bearer. If you're interested in referencing those, they're on pages 130 and 31 of the 1999 Ace Books publication of the complete trilogy. I don't think we need to go over each of them now, but one references the ending of an age, or ending of the age. So the fact that Suth knew all these riddles about the Star Bearer convinces Morgan to go find him so he can ask Suth how he learned the riddles. Again, this is interesting. So Suth is another wizard from Lungold, but again, there was nothing about the star riddles in any of their writings when Morgan and Ohm searched for them earlier. Once Morgan decides he will do what Har has asked, Har teaches Morgan how to defend himself from others trying to break into his mind, and then he teaches Morgan how to shapeshift himself into a Vesta, which again, kind of a little out of nowhere. All of a sudden, Morgan has the power to shapeshift into Vestas, but whatever. We'll roll with it here. I also see I'm going way over my self-appointed half-hour timeline, but what are you gonna do? We're 3/4 of the way through the book here now. After spending some time among herds of Vesta, Morgan does find Suth. Apparently he has a blind eye, so he was looking for a one-eyed Vesta, finds them. But Suth said he's already dead by speaking to Morgan, but Morgan pleads with him, you gotta help me, Suth. You gotta tell me what's going on with these stars. Suth agrees to help him, but then he suddenly begins to choke. I should say, Morgan asks him why he ran away from Lungold. Suth begins to answer, but he starts choking and dying, and he just manages to croak out the word Ohm before dying. So it seems like he ran away from Lungold because of Ohm. From here, Morgan brings news of Suth's death back to Har and then travels on to Isig, which is the last land in the north before Erlendstar Mountain. King Danon Isig is there. He's a shapeshifter too, though he shapeshifts into trees, which is interesting, but I guess it's pretty easy to hide if you can change into a tree in a forest. All of the realm's great craftsmen came from Isig, so I guess these guys are kind of like the dwarves of Patricia McKillip's land here. A man named Sol Isig cut the stars that are set into Yurth's harp, which Morgan now has. It just occurred to me that I guess maybe harpists have some power here in this land, because apparently harps can have magical properties like shattering other people's swords, so maybe in a way Death is kind of like a sword master. That thought just popped into my mind when I was reading that. Anyway, the main castle or building or house on Isig is built on top of the Cave of the Lost Ones, which was discovered by Yurth. There's some great shadow that lies there that shouldn't be disturbed, according to the wizard Yurth. Danon, who again is the king of Isig, can tell something terrible happened there long ago, maybe during the time of the Earthmasters, who again are those mysterious people who disappeared from the land long ago that Astron was investigating with his archaeology. So Morgan arrives at Isig. He goes to sleep that night, and a voice in a dream tries to make him walk to the cave, but then Death the harpist shows up and wakes Morgan up. Morgan asks Death if Ohm is the founder of Lungold, and Death kind of evades again, which, let's be honest, if Death isn't answering that question, it seems pretty obvious at that point that Ohm is also Gissel Ohm or G Ohm, or however you pronounce his name, the founding wizard of Lungold. Morgan speculates and worries that whatever it was that killed the Earthmasters is now plotting to kill the High One, and we learn that, if the High One dies, all of the land rule will fall apart, and, everything will fall apart without the land rule. Death kind of seems to agree with that analysis. He also notes that Yurth made a sword with 3 stars in it and buried it where that sword was forged with, what a coincidence, was Isig Mountain. So Death figures that sword is in the Cave of the Lost Ones. And again, remember, Morgan saw this sword when one of the shapeshifters changed into it several chapters back. And Death points out that the shapeshifter must have known about that sword, right? And so they'll likely be waiting for him to claim it. So there's going to be shapeshifters hiding in Isig Mountain, it would seem. Morgan also speculates that Sol Isig was perhaps killed because he saw that the sword was in that cave, and the shapeshifters wanted to keep the sword a secret. They don't want the man with the 3 stars getting his hands on the sword with 3 stars. Again, we don't exactly know why. Obviously, Morgan / the Star Bearer / the man with the 3 stars on his face is some sort of savior that's going to keep the shapeshifters from doing whatever they intend to do. But it's not Morgan's intention to go claim the sword right now. He wants to go talk to the High One first. He'll just leave it here in Isig Mountain. Let me argue with my fate a little longer, he asks Death. Let's see. One King Danon's grandchildren, his name is Bear. He's very interested in seeing the sword and volunteers to take Morgan to the Cave of the Lost Ones, but Morgan declines because he does not want to go claim the sword yet. But of course he goes to bed that night, and that same dream voice leads Morgan to the cave, so he gets to the cave anyway. In that cave, there are beings made of stone that appear to him who are the children of the Earthmasters. They were destroyed by the Great War. I think that's the first time we see the, quote, Great War referenced. Yeah, so there was some battle long ago, and they were mastered by the Earth, which, reading between the lines, seems to mean that somehow their Earth mastery was turned against them, so they've been trapped in this cave ever since. But they say a man of peace was promised to them. And of course, one of these children of the Earth, hands Morgan a sword, which is the sword with the 3 stars on it. Morgan kind of interrogates the children a little. They say those from the sea destroyed them. Some people named Adolin and Sek, who at this point we don't know who they are. Though I'll be honest, I did not read books 2 or 3 yet to make sure I didn't give you any spoilers, but I looked Adolin and Sek up in the glossary of the book. There's a little glossary at the back, and it says they are Earth Masters. So that's interesting. So it seems maybe there's some split amongst the Earth Masters, and they led some beings out of the sea that destroyed them. I don't know. You'll have to read books 2 and 3 to find that out. Morgan can help the children who are trapped here in this cave by, quote, freeing the winds. And then they referenced one of these riddles that we kind of heard before. They say, one star will call out of silence the master of the winds. One star out of darkness, the master of darkness. One star out of death, the children of the masters of the earth. And then they add, you have called, they have answered. And again, the they there is a little ambiguous, I noticed. Are they saying the children, just the children have answered? Or are they saying all the people that were just mentioned here? So the master of the winds, the master of darkness, and the children of the masters of the earth have answered. Unclear at this point, though. So that's referencing the riddle that Har had earlier. Also, this would be the dark night of the soul point here, kind of the all is lost moment. The children drop here. Well, the war is not finished, so the war that destroyed the Earth Masters, only silenced for the regathering, whatever that means. Then they tell Morgan, you will bear stars of fire and ice to the ending of the age of the High One. So it seems like they're predicting the death of the High One, which again will be a disaster for the land here, right? Morgan obviously has more questions for the children, but then this beautiful woman appears amongst the children, and the children begin to melt back into stone. They don't come right out and say this, but this would seem to be Ariel, the same shapeshifter that attacked Morgan way back in Chapter 4. Morgan rushes out of the cave and sees men of the color and movement of the seas with lanterns kind of coming up the cavern towards him. So it seems that maybe the shapeshifters and those creatures from the sea are in league after all. But Bear shows up. Remember, he's the grandchild who was interested in finding the sword in the first place, and he helps Morgan escape. Morgan has been holding onto the sword the whole time, and he beats 3 shapeshifters in a fight, killing all of them with that sword. There's a nice action scene on pages 169 and 170 that I thought was very well written here. Let's see. Morgan stared down at his limp, motionless body, looking oddly small on the harsh stones. So this is Bear was just injured by one of the shapeshifters. And Morgan, remember, does not really want to be a fighter, but then something unwieldy, uncontrollable shook through him, welled to an explosion of fury behind his eyes. He ducked a sword thrust that bit at a man like a silver snake. He ducked a sword thrust that bit at him like a silver snake, pulled the harp strap over his neck and dropped it, then reached for the sword beneath Bear. He plunged through the archway, eluding by a hair's breadth 2 blades that whistled through the air behind him, caught a third on its way down, brought it up, high upward to a dull ring and blaze of sparks, then loosed it abruptly and slashed sideways. Blood burst like a sun across one shell-colored face. A blaze of fire ripping down his arm caught his attention. He whirled. A blade drove toward him. He sent it spinning almost contemptuously across the floor with a single, 2-handed stroke, then reversed the ponderous circle of the blade's sweep, and the shape-changer, coughing, hunched himself over the line of blood slashing from shoulder to hip. Yet another blade descended at him like a thread of silver that would have split him. He jerked back from it. He brought his sword down like an axe against a stump in a field, and the shape-changer, catching the blade in his shoulder, pulled it out of Morgan's hands as he fell. The silence settled ponderously about him. So yeah, some really good writing there, I thought. But, again, Morgan is demonstrating all of these traits that he doesn't seem to believe that he should have, right? All of a sudden, he can beat some people 3-on-1 in a sword fight, even though, a few chapters ago, he refused to even wear a belt knife. So, again, is this kind of rushed writing, or is this, I have a feeling, based on just I felt a lot of things were a little rushed, but then when I went back and read and found all the subtle foreshadowing, I'm kind of thinking once I move on to the next 2 books of the series, a lot of these special abilities Morgan kind of seems to be pulling out of thin air are going to make more sense. So that brings us to the final chapter of the book, the final journey to Erlendstar Mountain. Death notes that the High One is a Windmaster, so, is that riddle earlier about freeing the winds, something about freeing the High One? I don't know. What does the High One need to be freed from? That's interesting. Is the High One unwillingly serving as the leader of the land, waiting for someone else to take his place? I don't know. And then who is the Master of Darkness that the Star Bearer is supposed to be calling forth to? That's not clear at this point. Also, I think it's King Isig points out, why are they attacking Morgan instead of the High One when killing the High One would destroy the realm? And the answer to that would seem to be that Morgan is the only one who can answer these riddles about the 3 stars. And it would seem if you can answer these riddles, then you'll be able to stop the calamity that the shapeshifters and the people from the sea are trying to reap upon the land here. Let's see. We learn that Death is not a Lungold wizard. We get some kinds of conflicting reports here. Danon reveals that Yurth made the harp before the founding of Lungold, which doesn't mesh with what Death said about being there when Yurth made the harp, right? Because Death was born in Lungold. So it seems that Death was lying about being there when the harp was made. Why would he do that? Then, Morgan tries to use a mind probe on Death that Har taught him. So remember, Har can look into people's minds. Apparently he taught Morgan how to do that as well. But Death Death retaliates with a great shout. Remember, we saw the great shout back in chapter 2 when Rude kind of, used it on impulse and broke some stuff. So Death uses a great shout on Morgan to kind of, it hurts Morgan, not permanently, but, Morgan probably shouldn't be trying to pry into the mind of someone like Death, who obviously has a lot of unknown powers here. Then Morgan confronts Death about the lies, and Death basically says, I wasn't lying to you, but you just got to trust me. Morgan seems to accept that. So again, why was Death actually there when Yurth made the harp? And if so, why doesn't Danon know that? If Death was there when Yurth made the harp, it would seem that Death is not who he says he is. That would mean he's probably older than he says he is. It's interesting. A lot of question marks around Death here. So then they leave Isig. Final trip to Erlendstar Mountain. On the way, Death teaches the Great Shout to Morgan, who then accidentally starts an avalanche when he tries to use it. They reach Erlendstar Mountain. The High One is there in his throne room. It is Ohm, who is also Gissel Ohm, the founder of Lungold, and he confirms he is also its destroyer. So Ohm is in fact the wizard who founded and destroyed Lungold, and he is also the High One. So that all comes together. And then Morgan seems to cast a great shout at the very end of the book that splits the doors of the great hall. Let's see, the last paragraph of the book here. No, he whispered. Oh, no. Then he felt the word well up from some terrible source, tear out of him, and the barred doors of the High One's house split from top to bottom with the force of that shout. So there ends book 1 of the Riddle-Master Trilogy. Hope that was interesting analysis there. We talked for about an hour. Let's see. My favorite non-main character. I have just a couple other categories here. I think Death would be an obvious choice, right? He kind of reminds me of the Fool from Assassin's Apprentice a little. He's definitely kind of like the mentor wizard figure here that, every hero's journey structure has one of those people. Taking our references from earlier, we have Gandalf in The Hobbit and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. I also liked Lyra. She's kind of like the blunt, straightforward warrior type, dedicated to her duty. Let me see. She had a good quote that I liked here. Let me see. Where did I write that down? Well, I can't find exactly where I wrote it down, but but she says, I prefer questions I can throw a spear at or something like that. So I love that. Let's see, a few. I won't go through all of these. These will be in the notes here, but some examples of prose I liked here. Someone talking to Morgan. Morgan tells him he should take up music or something. This is right after he got punched in the face by his brother. And the person responds, I'm as musical as a tin bucket. Your mouth looks like a squashed plum. I thought was funny and good description, I think. Let's see. The man could find a pinhole in a mist, describing someone who's really observant. Let's see. The shadows flitted away in the room, sat hunched in corners behind furniture. Let's see. Just stones, silence, and a terrible sense of something lying just beyond eyesight, like a dread in the bottom of your heart. His blood panicked through him. All right, so just a few examples of nice writing there that I thought. Let's see, maybe a couple. Just one Arthurial observation here. There is a save the cat moment in the book. There's this kind of idea that if you want to create some sympathy for your main hero early on, they should do something nice in the beginning, right? Like, rescuing a cat from a tree. That's the save the cat moment. But, in the opening pages, Morgan's brother says he wishes he had a fast horse from this particular realm. And then later in chapter 1, Morgan says, there's really no connection between these two things, but he says offhand, he's going to market to go look for a horse from that realm, which is kind of a subtle save the cat moment. He's going to go find the horse that his brother wanted. So I thought that was interesting. A few hot take predictions here for about what's going to happen in the next 2 books. I've got 3. I think Death is an Earthmaster or a child of an Earthmaster. Maybe he's the High One's son. Though he did seem to imply at some point that he didn't know who his father was. I think he said something along the lines of, he went to study in Lungold for a while because he thought maybe his father was a wizard. So maybe he's not the High One's son, or if he is, he doesn't know. I could be way off with that guess, but Death, obviously, there's lots of mystery around him that I assume we're going to learn more about. I also thought maybe he was a wizard, but Death comes right out and says, he says he wasn't a Lungold wizard, right? So I guess he could be a different type of wizard? I don't know. Maybe Death was the singer from Ohm's story in chapter 2, the one that offended King Har. Death does not go to King Har's realm, for what that's worth. He does vow to give his life for Morgan because he has the 3 stars, and the children of the Earthmasters seemed really into the 3 stars riddle, so, again, maybe that's how he relates to the Earthmasters there. Let's see. And it would seem he's not an enemy. There's a bit of an ominous ending at this book, but, the Morgul of Hurin, I didn't talk about this, but Death and the Morgul of Hurin seem to be a couple. And she has that gift of sight that lets her see through people. So if Death was a bad guy, it doesn't seem that the Morgul of Hurin would be with him. Also, I thought it was interesting. At one point, Death says he only ever talked to G-Ohm twice, so the leader of the wizards. And he thought there was no evidence that would have made him think that, Master Ohm was Gissel Ohm or whatever. So was the High One deceiving Death? Maybe the High One is a shapeshifter too, or was Death just lying when he said that? I don't know. Let's see a couple other quick predictions here. By the end of the 2nd book, Morgan will have an opportunity to safely return to Hed, but he will voluntarily refuse it for misguided reasons. That's just kind of straight out of the hero's journey. Usually at some point the hero has a chance to return home, but something has happened that causes them not to want to go. But I think by the end of book 3, he'll end up returning to Hed, and he will marry Ray Durrell. Usually the hero's journey ends up with sort of a happy ending like that. Let's see. And then finally, I think the Lungold Wizards were the remaining Earthmasters after that great war. They must have developed some way to restrain the people from the sea who destroyed their civilization. And then the High One destroyed Lungold when there was some sort of schism that developed between the wizards over freeing the ones from the sea. So we'll see if that pans out. Let's see a few of my favorite quotes here to finish up. If you're new to the show, I usually do a quote of the week and then write an essay about it. I didn't have time to do that this week, and we're already over an hour into the show here. So let's see. I'll just read a couple of these quickly here. Turn forward into the unknown rather than backward toward death. It's at page 76. When you open your mind and hands and heart to the knowing of a thing, there is no room in you for fear. That's also on page 76. Here you can. Let's see. I think Morgan said this in response to something that Lyra had said, but you can't solve riddles by killing people. And then that's on page 93, and then on page 94. I prefer problems I can throw spears at. And then this is a quote from Death. Someone says, Death shouldn't be giving, or Death says he's not allowed to give advice or something like that. He can only do what the High One tells him to do. And then I think it's Lyra again. She says, well, you were arguing with Morgan earlier. And Death's like, I didn't argue. I simply pointed out the illogic of his arguments. And then there's a long one here on page 130. I think this is Har saying this to Morgan. Will you doom us all with your own refusal to look at yourself and give a name to what you are? The wise man knows his name. You are no fool. You can sense as well as I can what chaos is stirring beneath the surface of our existence. Loose your grip on your past. It is meaningless. Your land can exist without you, but if you run from your own destiny, you are liable to destroy us all. Let's see. And then the last one here. The wise man assumes nothing. Page 149. So there you go. That's my discussion of Riddle-Master of Hed by Patricia A. McKillip. If you found this interesting, shoot me an email, dtkane@dtkane.com. I'm going to try to do an episode like this. Once, maybe every other month, so maybe 6 times a year. And if you found my analysis interesting, maybe you'll like my fiction, and you can tune into the regular episodes of DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club, where I narrate my own fiction. I said there are 5 books in my spoken book series so far. I have read the entirety of the first one so far on the podcast, and we're about 4/5 of the way through the second book, so you can kind of get some audio fiction for free if you're willing to listen to it slowly over the course of many weeks as I narrate it on my own. Or you can also check out my books at dtkane.com, or most places you can buy ebooks. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google, Kobo, Apple, those places. They're also available in print on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And the show is available at all the normal places that you listen to podcasts, and also on YouTube. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing this crazy hat, it's because the main character in my Spoken Books Uprising series wears a hat just like this, so maybe you can go check it out. But if you have any comments, good or bad, about this discussion here, or if you have questions about Riddle-Master that you'd maybe like to hear me answer on a subsequent show, you can email me, dtkane@dtkane.com. That's, Delta Theta Kane, Kane, @dtkane.com. I also have a weekly newsletter where I, give analysis of a quote of the week each week. So my fantasy quote of the week, I'm kind of on a crusade to show that you can get cool real life lessons out of quotes from fantasy books. I also, of course, share news about my current writing projects, and I share photos of the week as well. I'm a hobbyist photographer and share some neat photos. So if any of that sounds interesting, you can go to dtkane.com and sign up for my once weekly newsletter. I always try to put something of value in there, like my quotes of the week. So it's not just a big advertisement in your mailbox once a week. There's actually some interesting stuff in there. So that's all. If you made it all the way to the end of this hour and 15-minute episode, I commend you. Thank you for listening. And until next time, this has been DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. Thanks for listening to DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. If you liked today's episode, please consider rating and reviewing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button and the bell so you get notified whenever new episodes become available. If you'd like to listen to back episodes or review the show notes, visit dtkane.com/podcast. DT Kane's novels are available for purchase at most major online retailers, or you can purchase directly from his website at www.dtkane.com/books. You can receive a free short story and sign up for DT Kane's mailing list at dtkane.com/email-signup. If you'd like to connect, you can find DT Kane on Facebook at DT Kane Author or Twitter at DT Kane Author, or send DT Kane an email at dtkane@dtkane.com. See you next week.